All right. So seventh class today. Now, to prove the equivalence of this characterization, we were talking about two different characterizations of lim sup and lim in. So to prove the equivalence of this characterization to the original definition is this one. This is the definition of limit superior and limit inferior. This is the original definition I'm talking about. The supremum of the set of all subsequential limits. So we observe that for an unbounded sequence, the equivalence is trivially proved. Okay, for an unbounded above sequence, lim sup is plus infinity. For a sequence diverging to minus infinity, the lim sup is minus infinity as well. This we have already seen and are convinced of. Now, so it only remains to show for bounded sequences, in which case the original definition is actually equivalent to the first characterization given in this theorem 5.10, that is for all epsilon positive, infinitely many terms exceed L minus epsilon, and only finitely many terms can exceed L plus epsilon. So that is my this theorem says. So it only remains to show for bounded sequences, in which case the original definition is actually equivalent to the first characterization given in this one. This theorem says this is if and only if condition, if and only if missed it, yes, if and only if condition for the number L to be lim sup. So yes, so that is actually equivalent to show this to be the first characterization for in case of bounded sequences. In 5.12, we proved one side of the claim. This one, the last theorem we proved in the other class, last class. One side of the claim. So it only remains to show. It finally boils down to proving this proposition that let Xn be a bounded sequence and L is this weird quantity, infimum of the supremum of the tail. Then this L will have these two properties, that infinitely many terms will be greater than L minus epsilon, and all but finitely many terms will be smaller than L plus epsilon. Okay. All right. So proof, we are proving number 2 first. There is no other reason, because number 2 fits in this small space over here. Number 1 takes a little bit more. So that is why I'm doing number 2 first. Okay. No special reason. So choose epsilon arbitrary. By definition of infimum, this is an infimum. So by definition of infimum, there exists a natural number k such that supremum of, so this is infimum over, this is the thing. So this is a quantity. This entire supremum of this tail is a quantity that depends on n. That depends on n. So that is why we are taking infimum over n. So as if you remember, we denoted this thing by capital M subscript n. So this quantity depends on n. Now this is infimum of this thing, infimum over n of this thing. So infimum is greatest lower bound. So anything greater than that cannot be a lower bound. So that means if I increase my L to be L plus epsilon, then it will not be a lower bound anymore. So there will be something smaller than that. Now what kind of element will be smaller than that? Some m, capital M k, for some natural number k will be the violatory element. So that is what I have written. Capital Mk is nothing but supremum of the terms starting from k, supremum of xk, xk plus 1, xk plus 2, and so on. Hence, for all n greater than or equal to k, but this means the supremum of the entire tail starting from kth term is smaller than L plus epsilon. Entire tail starting from the kth term is smaller than L plus epsilon. So therefore, for all n greater than or equal to k, each term is smaller than L plus epsilon. The supremum of the entire tail is smaller than L plus epsilon. So each term will be smaller than L plus epsilon as well. Since epsilon positive is arbitrary, the second property is proved. This proves this property that for after a threshold mark, everything is smaller than that. So only terms which can exceed L plus epsilon are first k minus 1 many terms. So only finitely all but finitely many terms are smaller than L plus epsilon. As simple as that. It is proved. Now the first one. So we are going to show that infinitely many terms, whatever epsilon positive, infinitely many terms of xn are greater than L minus epsilon. Okay. So this is what we are going to show now. So choose epsilon arbitrary. Then for each natural number n, write mn as the usual notation, supremum of xn, xn plus 1 and so on. So since L is infimum of all these mn's, we can say that for all natural number n, L minus epsilon is smaller than mn. Now understand this thing. L, capital L is infimum, is the greatest lower bound of mn's. Now anything smaller than that will definitely be another lower bound. Okay, L is the greatest of all lower bounds. So anything smaller than L is definitely a lower bound. So we can say that for all n, L minus epsilon is smaller than mn. Okay. Next, again exploiting the definition of supremum, because mn is a supremum. Remember, mn is a supremum. Again, exploiting the definition of supremum, we get that for all n there exists a number, a term xkn. So in this one, xn, xn plus 1, n plus 2, such that L minus epsilon less than xkn. So understand this, that mn, so that is the supremum of all these things, all these things is greater than L minus epsilon. So we must have a number xkn which is greater than L minus epsilon. Now mn, so what did it say? L minus epsilon is smaller than all the mn. So all the mn's are coming over here in this portion, mn. Now mn is supremum of these terms. Now let us explore the definition of supremum. What does it say? So I claim that there are some term over here, so that for each n, so if say n equal to 1, let's say. So for m1, since m1 is greater than L minus epsilon, I claim that there is some term which is more than L minus epsilon as well. Because if that is not the case, if every term is smaller than L minus epsilon, then mn will be smaller than L minus epsilon as well. It will not be bigger than L minus epsilon. That is not possible. So I claim that for each n there exists a term for, so this is true for m1, same will be true for m2, same will be true for m3. So for each m we should get some element from here which will be situated to the left of L minus epsilon. Okay, so this is my L minus epsilon, and so those terms should be situated to the left of this. Fine. So this such that this must be true. Okay. Now it is left to the reader, to you, that as an exercise to show that we can always choose k1, see here, K1 is for n equal to 1, K2 is for n equal to 2. So we can always choose, there is a printing mistake. K1 smaller than K2, smaller than K3, smaller than K4, and so on. This is a mistake. I have to rectify this. So we can, so this is your exercise to show that we can always get that. This is a so take this as an assignment and just give me the proof in formal sentences. So we can always get K1 less than K2. We can always choose K1 less than K2 less than K3 and so on. Then xkn is a subsequence of xn, of the original sequence, each term of which is greater than L minus epsilon. This proves the first property and hence the proposition. Okay, that's it. Because there is a subsequence, so infinitely many terms are greater than L minus epsilon. So this proves the first property. The fun part of this entire exercise is that this proves the mighty Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem in a flash, in one line. Remember that the proof of Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem? It was at least one page from the book, and if you want to write in your exam paper, it will be at least 2-3 pages. So if you define things this way, then if you define, understand this thing, if you define your limit superior to be infimum of the supremum of these elements, then you can prove Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem extremely easily. For a bounded sequence, this is the proof. For a bounded sequence xn, L equal to this one is a finite real number. For a bounded sequence, this L is a finite real number. We need bounded sequences only. Bolzano-Weierstrass is bounded sequence has a convergence of sequence. So we have worked for bounded sequences only. So L is equals to infimum of the supremum is a finite real number. And hence, by the last theorem, this theorem says any epsilon neighborhood of L packs in infinitely many terms of xn, because L minus epsilon is exceeded by infinitely many terms, and L plus epsilon, this thing over here, L plus epsilon, let me keep it over here, this is L plus epsilon, this is exceeded by only finitely many terms. So this is exceeded to the right of this one, L minus epsilon, there are infinitely many. To the right of this one, there are only finitely many. So within this one, we have got infinitely many. And that means L minus epsilon to L plus epsilon, this epsilon neighborhood has infinitely many terms of xn of the sequence, and therefore this is a subsequential limit. Why is this section 5? This is not section 5. This is called theorem 5.3. This is 5.3. A real number is a subsequential limit if and only if every neighborhood of x contains an infinitely many terms of xn. So this is the immediate characterization we had seen in the earlier classes. So that means this proves Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem. So this is done. So last theorem, every epsilon neighborhood of L packs in infinitely many terms of xn, and therefore by that theorem it is a subsequential limit. So we have shown the existence of a subsequential limit. That means it has a convergent subsequence. So this 1, 2, 3 line proof, 3 sentence proof of Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem. If you assume this definition of this as the definition of lim sup and lim inf. This is the proof of Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem, 3 line proof. Okay. Now this next remark is important. This small proof of Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem is not possible after the first characterization. The first characterization is that is what we proved over here. Is not possible after the first characterization. Why? Because the existence of L in this theorem L, existence of L over here is guaranteed by Bolzano-Weierstrass. So we cannot use this criteria, first characterization to prove Bolzano-Wurstel in that way, in this short way. Because understand this thing, that we use the second characterization to prove first characterization, and that implied Bolzano-Wurstel. So, but first characterization is not itself sufficient to conclude this thing, because for the first characterization, the existence of this number L is guaranteed by uh, Bolzano-Wurstel theorem. See, by Bolzano-Wurstel theorem, there is a convergence of sequence of that infinite part, and this comes as the L plus epsilon. This gives the thing for L plus epsilon. Okay, so we cannot have the first characterization without Bolzano-Wurstel, but we can have the second characterization without Bolzano-Wurstel, and that actually helps us to prove Bolzano-Wurstel in 3 lines. The following inequalities regarding limit superior and limit inferior are often helpful. This is some list of inequalities. You can see the proof of these things in the book. This, you are supposed to know all these things. I was just providing you the context. Okay. Now start Cauchy sequences. This is the new thing. So for this one, we actually started this entire prerequisite. A Cauchy sequence is a kind of sequence where the terms of the sequence eventually get mutually close to one another. So, I mean, as close as you want, mutually close to one another. This phenomenon of terms of a sequence getting mutually close is known as the Cauchy criterion. Okay, when a sequence satisfies Cauchy criteria, they are said Cauchy sequences. But the glaring question is, why do we need to bother? Always ask this question: why do we need to bother? To your every teacher, you ask this question: why do we need to do this particular particular theorem? Why do we need to do this particular sum? Always ask this question: why do we need to bother? Let's see the reasons. Because it serves 2 main purposes. What is the purpose? In case of sequence of real numbers, it provides a necessary and sufficient condition for checking convergence of a sequence. As we know, the definition of convergence is not a constructive one. It presumes the knowledge of a real number that can serve as a limit of the sequence, and the definition just verifies that. Without the knowledge of the limit, the definition is just like a pistol without a bullet. Without the limit, it cannot do anything. Cauchy criterion solves this problem. A sequence of real numbers satisfying Cauchy criterion always turns out to be convergent, and that too without the knowledge of the limit itself. Extremely important. We do not need to know the limit of a sequence to check whether that is convergent or not. That is the main advantage of discussing Cauchy criteria in case of real analysis. This is the main reason. It guarantees that judging the terms of the sequence only. The second criteria is a little bit more abstract. In case of sequence of more abstract elements, Cauchy criterion provides an alternative description of completeness of that abstract set. It turns out that convergence of a sequence does not only depend on the terms of the sequence, but also on the set they are coming from. So understand this last line carefully. It turns out that convergence of a sequence does not only depend on the terms of the sequence, but also on the set those terms are coming from. This is an extremely important revelation in the analysis, in the realization in the theory of analysis. In the metric spaces, what you will learn in this semester only, this is going to be a very crucial categorization of metric spaces, that in some spaces we will have this convergence, Cauchy sequences not convergent in some sense. I mean, those things will be there. So this Cauchy criterion actually provides completeness of that abstract set. A sequence of only, is a simple example, a sequence of only rational numbers can be Cauchy, but may not be convergent among the rationals. But considering the same sequence as a sequence of real numbers, it turns out to be convergent. Just like a sequence converging to root 2. So root 2, I mean, then it is what do I say? The sequence of rational numbers converging to root 2. So that sequence is not convergent if we consider our universal set to be set of all rational numbers, because the limit root over square root of 2 does not exist in our universal set of rational numbers. But so that is why Q is not complete. But the same sequence, if we consider a sequence of real numbers, it turns out to be convergent. In this way, Cauchy criterion provides the necessary and sufficient condition to check for completeness of the underlying set. So that I will give you motivations that why completeness is something to worry about while we do metric spaces during the later part of this course. We'll exploit this fact heavily in our study of metric spaces. Now let us see definition of Cauchy sequence. Probably you know this definition. Xn is a real sequence, then Xn is said to satisfy Cauchy criterion if for all epsilon positive there exists k such that for all mn greater than or equal to k, all term index greater than or equal to k, the distance between xm and xn is smaller than epsilon. This you always have. A sequence satisfying the Cauchy criterion is called a Cauchy sequence. That's it. An alternate version of Cauchy criterion is just replace this n by n plus p. For all epsilon positive, there exists k such that n greater than or equal to k, the distance between n plus p minus xn less than epsilon holds for every p in n. Okay, so let me explain this one a little bit. Now, as the definition of Cauchy criterion, we said, where is it? Here. Yeah. As the definition, as the description, not the definition, as the description of Cauchy criteria, we said Cauchy sequence is a kind of sequence where the terms of sequence they eventually get mutually close to one another. So terms of the sequence, this xn is a term, xn is a term, they are close to one another by epsilon distance, as close as you want. For all epsilon positive, you may get this thing. So eventually means this after this threshold term. So k is the threshold term index. After k, everything is within epsilon distance from one another. That is what I mean by eventually get mutually close to one another, however close you want. So that is what it says. And here, same thing, out of xm and xn, I mean out of m and n, one must be bigger. Assume that m is bigger than n. Then we can always write m as n plus p, where p is a natural number. So x n plus 1, x n plus 2, x n plus 3, and like this. X n plus 1 minus x n plus 2 minus x n plus 100 minus x n, and so on. So that holds for every p in n. Examples, the sequence 1 by n is a Cauchy sequence. Proof, very easy. Choose epsilon positive arbitrary, then for mn in n, the distance between 1 by m and 1 by n, this is the mth term, this is the nth term, less than epsilon, is implied by the sum being less than epsilon. The difference is less than epsilon is implied by the sum is less than epsilon. Obviously, this term, this quantity is definitely bigger than this quantity. And this is implied mn is greater than or equal to k, where k is this 2 by epsilon plus 1. As simple as that. This is very easy, and you know why do we take this integer function, I mean, what is that, greatest integer function, and plus 1, why do we add? You know all these results, all these reasons from the from your existing knowledge. So this is a Cauchy sequence. Next up, this one is not a Cauchy sequence. This one, a sequence is not Cauchy. There exists epsilon naught greater than 0 such that for all k in n, there exists m naught and n naught greater than or equal to k such that the distance between them is more than or equal to epsilon naught. So we are going to prove this statement for this sequence. So for the sequence xn, we see that for every n, choosing m is equal to 2n, xm minus xn is, so m is 2n, so that is x2n minus xn. So x2n is 1 plus half plus up to 1 by 2n, and xn is 1 plus half plus up to 1 by n. So what remains is from n plus 1 to 2n. So this is 1 by n plus 1 plus 1 by n plus 2. This is what it remains. Now each of these terms is greater than the smallest term. 1 by 2n is the smallest term. It actually exactly greater. So 1 by 2n plus 1 by 2n plus, I mean, if I replace all the terms by 1 by 2n, then it will be this quantity will definitely be greater than this quantity. And what is this quantity? This is half. This is, there are n many 2n's are there, and 1 by 2n, so n into 2n, this is half. So x minus xm, the distance is always greater than half. So this is our epsilon naught, violatory epsilon naught. So choose epsilon naught is equal to half, and for all natural number k, choose m naught is 2k and n naught is k. That is what we are going to produce. For every k, we are going to produce a m naught, produce an n naught, so for which this will happen. So choose m naught is 2k, n naught as k. Therefore, by the above inequality, we have x m naught minus x n naught is greater than or equal to epsilon naught. Okay, greater than or equal to half. So hence the sequence is not Cauchy.